Quigley in 5, underwater in the yellow lane.
Jess Carling of Great Britain.
Quigley goes through. The silver to Jess Carling. Wonderful silver medal for Great Britain.
Welcome to the Honest Athletes podcast with
Lauren Quigley
and Jazz Carlin. Welcome back to the Honest Athletes podcast. I hope you're all doing safe and well. We are both so excited to be speaking to this week's guest. It was actually just over 2 years ago that I first picked up his book, and I honestly think it was the quickest that I have ever read through a book. It's truly an incredible and inspirational story, from being locked up behind bars to completely turning his life around and the true power of sport. Welcome to the podcast, John, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to be talking to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on. An honour. I'm honoured.
John, I read your book, and I don't read books. That's not what I do. And like Josh just said, I couldn't put it down. And I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. And every chapter I read of your story, because I read it at the same time as my mum, we both believe that. And each chapter we'd say that will happen for a reason, that happened for a reason. And the further we went on, we were like, that's the reason, that's the reason. Super inspirational story for so many. We just wanted to start off by asking you how you've been this past year and a bit now, because I mean, it's changed the world, and I just wondered how you've coped with it and how you've dealt with it.
Yeah, do you know what? Obviously, as your life progresses and you grow through life, when this situation occurred, like when lockdown happened, when I was in Britain, because of my perception of reality, based on my personal experiences, like when I was in prison, for instance, I spent a whole year in isolation where I hardly spoke to any human being other than a prison officer that would let me out to go and get my food, to go back to my cell. I didn't take exercise or anything like that. So I was locked in this tiny 6 by 12 foot cell. So kind of my perception of what lockdown represented was very different to a lot of other people. But what really affected me during the lockdown was the impact that I saw it was having on other people that I was close to, and people that work with vulnerable people, work with young people in particular. And I was hearing these like terrible stories of kids, and they wasn't learning, and like they was in sort of really sort of abusive households, and they wasn't having sort of that outlet of going to school. And then like my links into the food banks in the country where people couldn't even put food on the table, like unemployment went up and people, they didn't know what was happening with their salaries, and then they were dependent on food banks, and then like the sort of pressure that was put on food banks, and it kind of, yeah, like it motivated me massively to do something when we were in the first lockdown when I was in Britain, because I'd been training all year up to that point to race in the summer. I knew I probably wasn't going to race, but in perspective of what was happening, it was irrelevant. I didn't really care. But I was really fit. So I thought, what can I do to sort of use all the fitness that I built up in my body? I didn't just want to waste it, sit about. And I was still training during lockdown. I just had to adapt my training. I had to do 4 or 5 hour turbos and round machine in my house because I couldn't swim and stuff. But then I started, I rode from Lansing to John O'Groats on my indoor trainer, and raised about £10,000 for the Trestle Trust food banks. And then I was going, and I was doing volunteering work, and I was trying to help the rowing club that set up like a committee that were going down and packing PPE for doctors and nurses. And I was just trying to be of service, and I didn't just want to sit about and do nothing. And what I've always noticed in my own life is when I'm out of control to an element, it's like I've always took back control. I didn't want the situation to control me. So I wanted to be the one that took the ball and run with it and did something. I didn't just want to sort of sit around and wait for this moment to pass. And I just wanted to be proactive. And it's quite ironic because obviously I did it years ago when I was in that prison cell and I started exercising. And then when this happened, again, I wanted to take the initiative and I wanted to take control back of the situation and sort of try just to help people as much as I could, really.
It is amazing. Even watching you during lockdown, doing Land's End to John O'Groats, and it was like every challenge, you just seem to keep going. And it's like there's nothing seems to stop you. And obviously from reading your book and knowing about your story, it is amazing, the mindset. And we're obviously going to talk about that more. But obviously for some may have heard your story, and for some that are listening, they may not have heard it, or they may be hearing it for the first time. So can we just take it back to your childhood? What were you into growing up? Were you into sport at all, or the physical exercise or anything like that? It'd be great to take it back to your childhood.
So when I was a little boy, like I was very hyperactive. And I know, like looking back at my life and what my mum tells me, like I just used to drive my mum and my sister completely mad because I had so much energy. But like really in my life, like as a child, it was I had the most incredible sort of young childhood a kid could imagine. Like I wasn't abused. I was loved. My mum had 6 sisters. I was basically just brought up by women. My mum, 6 aunties, and my sister. And when I started going to primary school, it was only then when I started really interacting with other children that I kind of realised I didn't have a dad. And the reason I did is because kids at primary school used to start teasing me, like, "Where's your dad?" And I didn't know it wasn't normal not to have a dad because I didn't have a dad, so I didn't know what I was missing. And I remember I went home and I asked my mum where my dad was. And my mum basically explained to me about my dad died before I was born. My mum was 8 months pregnant with me, and my dad passed away. He's 38 years old. He had a massive heart attack in bed next to her, and he died. And so I was born to one without a father. And I remember my mum telling me my dad passed away, and obviously she simplified it and said my dad went to heaven. But when I was little, I was very inquisitive, and I loved understanding and learning. And I asked my mum what that meant. And my mum sort of explained my dad had passed away and he wasn't here anymore and what death was. And even though I was young, that was one of the most profound moments in my whole life as a child. And then later on in my life, and how that thread of death has always stayed with me since a kid. Because what it did, when I realised my dad had died and he didn't exist anymore, I realised one day that I would die. Now, I know I was very young, so it was very simple how I was looking at it. But it made me so driven as a child and ambitious that when I got older, I wanted to do something. I wanted to achieve something. I wanted to be someone. I wanted to sort of leave a legacy. I was too young to understand what that meant, but that's what I wanted. And as I got a little bit older from that, I remember like I just developed this absolute fascination with history. And every month, my mum used to buy me these magazines at the newsagents called Discovery booklets, and used to basically, they were basically like different stages of history. So there would be about Napoleon, Henry VIII, World War I, World War II, and you would put these like child puzzles together in the booklets, and you would read about all these stages in history. And I just remember one day reading these booklets, and I've still got them today. My mum's got a bin bag of them full upstairs in her house. And I just remember like putting these puzzles together and realizing that like all of these people that I was reading about had died like hundreds of years before I was even born, but they had done something and been remembered, like they'd achieved something with their lives. And again, it just festered inside me. Like when I got older, I just didn't want to be normal. I didn't want to be average. I wanted to accomplish something in my life. And then that fascination sort of then manifested itself into then this desire to want to own British Telecom as a kid. Like when I was 8 years old, I used to watch the adverts on ITV, and I just remember watching the BT Tower in London on these adverts. And when I used to go around my own aunties and uncles' houses, and my mum used to we used to be in my mum's car, and she was driving around every corner had a BT phone box, and my aunties and uncles all had BT landlines. And I just remember, like, I asked my uncle one day, I said, "How much does British Telecom make?" And he said, "They make billions of pounds." And then I said, when I get older, I want to own British Telecom. But the reason I'm explaining this is because it was just this desire inside me. I was so ambitious. But what I did, I then made the correlation between success and money from a very young age. And it was that desire to want to own British Telecom. And then my mum's ex-husband come into my life, and that was where the sort of the negative direction, the road that I ended up traveling down.
You've just talked obviously about your childhood and having that fascination to be successful and own British Telecom, which would have been amazing, I'm sure. But then you've obviously just introduced your mum's ex-husband who came into your life. And I think I remember reading in the book that was a big moment because it was a male figure. And he obviously took you under his wing. And so that fascination channeled not into sport yet. It went down a path of ending in prison twice. A total of 10 years were you in prison? And so obviously sport hadn't been introduced yet. how aware of sport were you? Obviously, you knew what sport was and everything, but did you care about it at all? Or was it just, that's a different world and I'm not involved in that at all?
Well, to say I had literally no interest in sport whatsoever, I had zero. Like, I was, when I was a kid, if you saw photographs of me now, like when I was a teenager, I think you'd probably be shocked by how overweight I was. I went to an all-boys secondary school. It was very football dominated, and it was like, if you're not good at kicking a football, you're not good at sport. And I wasn't good at kicking a ball. Like, I remember at PE, when I did turn up to my PE lessons, because most of the time I just didn't turn up, I would always like be picked to go in goal, and I was always the last kid to get picked. No one wanted me on their team. When we used to do cross country running, I just used to pretend I had an injury, or I deliberately forget my PE kit. I had no interest in sport whatsoever as a child. I literally had none. I didn't ride a bike until I was 29. The first time I ever got on a bike. The first time I ever swam was when I was 29. The first time I ever got on a rowing machine was when I was 26 years old. Like, the first time really I ever ran was when I got out of prison when I was 29. Like, I didn't do these activities as a kid, really, other than when it was literally forced upon me in secondary school. But majority of the time, I do everything I could to avoid doing it.
Like, do you think at that age, if you'd have had maybe like a role model or someone in sport, I guess you said about like British Telecom and all that kind of stuff, do you think, I guess as we go into your story, we'd find the people that have really made a difference to your life and had an impact and really driven you and motivating you and giving you goals, I guess, in sport as well. Do you think if at a young age, if you'd have maybe had a role model that was involved in sport or that had driven you in like a different direction, I guess, do you think that would have made a big difference at all?
I've always said, when I look back on my life and I look at the defining moments of it, I have got no doubt in my mind whatsoever, if my mum's ex-husband would not have come out of prison when I was a little kid, I would have never have gone down the path I ended up going down. I've got no doubt about that whatsoever. And I'm convinced. That's why I'm so passionate about role models and positive role models for children, because we're so malleable when we're young. I'm a strong believer if you show someone a direction and support them. And I never had that as a kid. The only person that showed me that that was a male was my mum's ex-husband. And he was involved in organised crime. He was one of the most prolific armed robbers in the United Kingdom. He completely normalised a very alien, negative world to me as a kid. So when I grew up, I thought everyone that didn't do that was abnormal. So I've got no doubt if I would have had that in my life as a kid, my life would have gone down a very, very different path. And I don't know what I could have gone on to do, because obviously, like, I discovered I had an ability for endurance sport when I was 26 years old, sitting in a prison gym. Now, if I would have took up sport when I was a teenager properly and someone would have identified that in me and said, you're really good at this, and encouraged me, could I have gone to the Olympics? I don't know. But it was there. It was inside me. I had the mindset. I wanted to achieve something, and I had the physicality to do it. I don't know whether I could, but that's why I'm so passionate now about giving young people these opportunities to express their talents and abilities and reach their potential in life.
You just said, could I have gone to the Olympics? From reading your book, John, absolutely. I have no doubts. You're like the non-Olympic Olympian from reading that book, just from what you've done in the short space of time with, the lack of information really about sport and rowing. And we will get into that. Jazz and I spoke the other day about, just for a long time, about your whole story. And one of the things we were really interested in asking was, during one of your stints in prison, you went into solitary and you refused to come out. And if I'm not mistaken, that's when you started to do circuits, was it, in your cell? What was the motivation for you to do that at that point? And what motivated you to carry on? Because staying in the same room, doing the same exercises is tough.
Yeah, it was... what built up into that event was when I was a young man, when I was under 21 years old, when you go into the custodial system in Britain, you can't be kept with adults over the age of 21. So you're classed as a young offender. But because of the level of security that I was put on, because the police believed that I was a high escape risk because of my stepdad and my family. They thought someone might try to break me out of prison. I couldn't be kept with young offenders because they wanted to make me a category A prisoner, which then meant I had to be kept with adult prisoners. And then when I went to court, I got sentenced, my first sentence, and it didn't justify then the government, the Ministry of Justice, keeping me at that level of security with sort of much older men than myself. So then they did transfer me to a young offenders institution. Then when I got moved there, because I had just come from an adult prison as a category A prisoner, it was so unusual. They then got worried that I would try to escape in their prison. So what they did, I was there for like a day, 2 days, and I was in my cell. And then one afternoon, my cell door opens. There's loads of prison officers, and they wanted me to take all my clothes off and put me in this special yellow tracksuit. So when I was walking around the prison, that prison officers could identify that I was a high escape risk of the prison. So it's basically like you look like a canary. So that it's like all eyes are on you all the time, and you can't really just drift into the shadows and hide from the prison officers. And I refused to give them my clothes. That stemmed from my absolute detest and hatred towards them. Like, again, when you're a kid growing up in the environment I grew up in, organised crime, when I was a little bit older, it's that detest and that hatred towards the state, towards politicians, towards the Ministry of Justice. So when I'm in there, suddenly these prison officers are an extension of the state. So if they want me to stand up, I'd sit down. They say go left, I go right. I was as difficult as I could be. So when they wanted my clothes, I refused to give them. But obviously you're in prison and you're in their world, and they wasn't in my world. So they put me in a segregation unit, and they took my clothes off me and they put me in this yellow suit. But because I refused to do that in my cell on the wing, I had to go in front of the governor of the prison, and he basically, there's a punishment in prison. They've got their own laws within the prison system. And the governor gave me 7 days confined to cell, which was 7 days in the segregation unit. And anyway, the 7 days was up. The door opens. They said, I'm going back onto the wing. I'm in this yellow tracksuit now. And they said, when you go up to the wing, you're going to be allocated a wing cleaner's job. And I just said, that's not going to happen. I'm not going up there. I'm not cleaning up your crap every day. And they said, are you refusing another lawful order? And I said, yes, I'm not going to be a wing cleaner. So then they put me back in that cell. I got arrested, nipped again in the prison. They put me in front of the governor again. And then the governor basically gave me another 7 days confined to cell for refusing a lawful order. And I remember he smiled at me, and he basically said that I was in his world and I do what he tells me to do. And that's that. And I remember I went back to that cell, and when you're in that segregation unit, they can't stop you from reading books. And every week the librarian used to come around with a little trolley. And one day I just picked off this book, and it was about Nelson Mandela. And I just remember I was reading this book in his cell, and there was a chapter in it. And it was about when he was in prison in Robben Island, he used to smoke tobacco when he first went there. And what he realised was the prison officers was using it as a punishment to take away from him. So if he wouldn't do anything, they'd stop him from having tobacco. So he said, I'll never smoke again, and you haven't got that punishment over me. So then when I'm in that cell as a 19-year-old, in my head, I think, well, wait there. If this is the worst you can do to me, and you think by putting me in here, you're punishing me, I'll take it away from you. So I made the decision. And when I made that decision not to leave, I didn't realise it was going to go on for like 365 days when I did it at the beginning. But yeah, I made that decision not to leave. And then when I did make that decision, then it become about like, how am I going to sort of survive this situation that I'm in? So then I just started, I don't even know what made me do it. Like I didn't start exercising for aesthetics. I didn't train for fitness. I just started doing these exercises in this cell. And like I said, I wasn't interested in sport. I wasn't interested in health and fitness, but I did it because it made me feel alive. Like I felt like a human being, like I was in this tiny little box. And I just started doing these exercises, and I put these different exercises together. And at the beginning, I didn't even know what a burpee was. But I was doing that exercise. I was doing step ups and stuff. And I used to have to put my cell chair to the back of the cell, because we had these tiny little air flaps that you could get some air in from the windows over the bars. And it was the only ventilation you could really get into the cell. And I just remember that as the weeks and months progressed, I started off like doing 10 press ups, 10 burpees, 10 sit ups. And then as the weeks and months progressed, like I said, it built up to I would do 1,000 of each exercise. And then I'd read all day. I wouldn't sleep in my bed in the day because I didn't want them to think, or the prison officers to think I was just sleeping my prison sentence away. And then they opened up that door and they let me walk back out into the street. an angry, young, hateful man. I wasn't rehabilitated. I didn't want to be. And they let me back out. And I still had the same mindset as what I had before, but I just had even more hatred in my body towards the system.
How, obviously, we've gone through like a pretty crazy year, and a lot of people have found it very hard being, I guess, stuck in homes and only being able to go outside for an hour a day or whatever, and have felt quite constricted in that way. How does it feel like, I guess, being in a cell, a room, like 4 walls? Do you get like psychological support? Is there people that are supporting you? And I don't know, like that support system? Because for me, like that just, I don't know. I feel like that support to be able to help you to get on the road to better things and things like that is surely a key thing. Do you get much support in that, or is it just you and the 4 walls? Like, I don't.
When yeah, you don't get much support. Yeah, it's like when I was in there, and again, my situation is unique, and again, it's perception of reality. So when I was in that situation, right, it's coming back from when my stepdad and all of his friends used to tell me stories about when they were in prison and they were in segregation units, and that hatred towards the system. And it makes me sad today, because what fueled me in that situation was, one, I didn't want to show any weakness, because again, I was brought up, like when I was a little bit older, my stepdad came into my life, a very male, masculine, alpha male environment where you didn't cry, you were strong. And again, that hatred towards the system fueled me. And even when I was doing those exercises in that cell, I remember that I used to think it, and actually a couple of years ago, I did a talk at Nottingham-Trent University to students that were criminologists, and they were fascinated by the change in the way my life's gone. And now, like, I've sort of changed and harnessed it, something very negative and something very positive. But when I was in that cell, like, I just used to think, you cannot control my body. Like, you can take everything away from me, which they did. Like, I had nothing. Like, literally, I had nothing, not a thing in the world. And I was in that tiny box. And I just used to think, you cannot control me. You can't stop me from doing this. You can't stop me from doing this exercise. You can't stop me from reading. And I'll continue to do it. And what's very important, that I've said to a lot of people in the current situation, was I had to keep myself in the moment, that I had to stay present. I couldn't start letting my mind drift off to next week, to next month, to next year. I just had to basically control where I was in that moment and make sure I got through that day in the best shape I could get myself through to go into the next day, and then going to the next day. Because if I would have sat there at the beginning on day one thinking, this is going to be my life now, and obviously, like, I look what I've done in the last year, and so, like, to spend that much time in a 6 by 12 foot cell with very minimal human contact, like, you just have to keep yourself in that moment, and again, like, that bettering yourself. Like, I wanted to educate myself, I wanted to read books, I wanted to, like, not, it's weird because I didn't want to come out a better person in the regards of, I didn't want to change and rehabilitate. But I wanted to be, I didn't want to just waste that time. I wanted to come out of it with a positive.
Honestly, John, the difference, well, the contrast in the first time he came out and the second time he came out is unbelievable, like the change and what you went through. One part of the book that really struck a chord with me or made me think a lot, just about how you managed it, was when your best friend passed away whilst you were inside. I can't imagine it. I've lost someone very close, but I had my family around me, you know, all the support in the world I could have asked for. For you to have gone through that on your own inside, how did you cope with that? And do you think sport was a massive part of you managing to cope with that? Do you think that a lot of what happened there was channeled into sport? Yeah,
without a shadow of a doubt. Like, when my friend died, so, like, to give you some context, like, the lifestyle that I led and the people I was interacting with, like, on a daily basis, you would hear stories about people dying all the time, like people being shot, people being kidnapped, people being shot by the police, people just being taken out of your life and going into prison for 30 years. And these are people that you might have seen, like, regularly, and suddenly you never see them again. But you kind of think that you and your friends are immune from all that stuff. That's other people's stuff. Like, all that drama that goes on. So then when it happened to me personally, and it was someone that I'd basically grown up with, that I'd lived with, that I'd spent, like, I would honestly say in my whole life, even to today, he was the best friend I ever had. Like, I was, again, the lifestyle I led, I was very mistrusting of people. I always thought someone had an agenda, but he was literally the only person that I genuinely trusted 100% with my life. And I know he did with me, and I had this very strong relationship with him. So then to find out that he had died was one, I was in disbelief. But again, I know my life's very, very unusual, but like when I found out my friend had died, and then the next night you put news at 10 on and you're watching the news in your prison cell, and because my friend had died in the Netherlands with another group of people from UK committing a robbery, and as they were driving away, the car flipped on a motorway, and because the tyre blew out. And because it was unique that there were English criminals in the Netherlands committing armed robberies, and they basically all died by one person that broke his back, it was on news at 10. So to sit in your prison cell watching the last moments of your friend's life on a CCTV camera, and then like you're seeing a news crew at the side of the motorway, I just remember like it's just so hard to explain. Like it was like this moment, this awakening that I went through this process, and when I was in prison, like again, it was in the book that I was talking about a Rolex watch, and I just remember when I had this watch in prison, it was a £16,000 Rolex Daytona, and it had a black dial face, and there wasn't that many of them, and I had it in prison. It wasn't like I wasn't necessarily a materialistic person. I always wanted to accumulate wealth, because to me, wealth was success. It wasn't about look what I've got, look what you've not got. But when I was in prison, it was all the more the representation of, even though you've put me in here, you can't take my stuff off me. And it was arrogance towards the system, towards the prison officers, that you've put me in prison and I can still walk away with a watch that's worth more than your yearly salary. And I feel so embarrassed and ashamed to even say that to you today, but that's how my mind processed the environment in which I was in at that time. And when my mate died, I just looked at the watch and I looked at the cell, and that little boy that grew up and went to own British Telecom, like, I went to win and achieve something in my life. Like I was literally just pissing my life away down into a drain. And all these people that I like grew up admiring, all these criminals, they were old men rotting in prison, or they were dead. And because I could relate to the situation in which my mate died in, it was like I felt like I had a second chance. And I didn't want this life. It was the only way I can explain it. I just realised how pathetic this was, how I was in that situation, my mindset to where I was. And I just didn't want that anymore. Like I wanted to get out of this place. And honestly, like, it isn't as easy as this, but I knew from that night I would never again in my life commit a crime. I knew I wouldn't. But you can't just go to a prison officer and say, "Can you please let me out now? I've changed." But I knew I wouldn't. And then I was lost. Like I was lost. Like I didn't know what I could do. Because bear in mind, it all revolves around the ego, because my whole life, my whole identity as a young man was wrapped up in crime. So I had a reputation. I was respected towards people, my peers. Everything I thought in life revolved around money. And then suddenly you have to relinquish everything that you are to rebuild yourself for something new. And I didn't know what that could be, because I gave up my education at school, basically. I started truanting a lot. But I still had that desire. Like I still wanted to do something in my life, but I just didn't know what it was. And to say the stars aligned, that I went down that prison gym and got on that rowing machine, and then the prison officer spotted how good I was. And then when he did, when I did row, though, it wasn't even about being an athlete. It was a form. It was just at the beginning, it was a form of escapism, because when I used to sit on that rowing machine, the technique was awful. But it transcended me out of that prison. Like I just look at those numbers on that rowing machine for hours a day, and I just remember it was just very rhythmical. And I'll just zone out. And I remember just going to this trance, and I'll just look, and everyone just left me alone. Like prisoners didn't talk to me, prison officers didn't talk to me. And that was one of the big things, because when you're in prison, obviously I was trapped. I couldn't just get up and get out of there. I didn't have the choice just to move. So like, I often use this analogy to explain that, like, when you're in prison and you go through that process where you want to change, it's kind of like being a drug addict locked in a crack den, trying to get off drugs around drug addicts. And so I had to like sort of find a way in which I could escape this situation. And the rowing machine was that door. It was the thing that it just transcended me out of those four walls.
So how soon, obviously, because even when I've heard it, it's like, if you first do like a kind of fitness or a competition in the gym, and then everyone was like, whoa, like, how was he so good? And like, obviously you'd done loads of training, and then the rowing machine, like, how soon was it when, like, you talk about, was his name Darren that helped you in the gym? How soon was it when people started noticing and they were really like, whoa, like, this is really impressive? How soon was it when you were in the gym and on the rowing machine that those kind of numbers and things people started to notice?
Before you start, John, can I just quickly say, I did do a few months rowing in like an interim of swimming. And oh my Lord, when I was reading the rowing stuff that you'd done, I was just like, this guy is absolutely insane. Because I honestly, I couldn't believe it. Like I say, every chapter, there was something from each chapter that I was like, this guy is a superhuman. Right here. So please, I'm so interested for this. So interested.
If we go back a few years, right? So when I got arrested the second time, and then I was basically in the high security prison estate for 4 years of my sentence. So I was in 2 years. I was in a high security unit in Belmarsh prison, and then I got transferred out of there, and I got transferred to a maximum security prison in Yorkshire. And there's only five maximum security prisons in the United Kingdom. Anyway, I get moved there. I'm category A. I'm around I'm around every psychopaths and terrorists, like the real sort of top of the tree criminals in the regards of, like, if they escape, they must be made impossible. Anyway, so I go to this place, and it's just like a lunatic's asylum. But I go there. I'm in this high security prison, and within prison, again, very masculine, alpha male. Everyone wants to be strong. Everyone's in the gym pumping iron. They want big muscles. Anyway, every Christmas, they have these competitions. And they have a fitness competition. It was called Superstars. And then they had a strongman competition. And basically, I remembered I entered these two competitions, and purely because it got you off the wing down the gym, and it just got you a couple of extra gym sessions. And I'd been doing all my cell circuits in the high security unit when I was waiting my trial for 2 years. So anyway, I go to this prison, and obviously because it's this sort of like little bubble, who's the fittest in the prison, who's the strongest in the prison? It's like the big kudos, who the fittest prisoner is, who's the strongest prisoner. And anyway, I did the Superstars competition. There was a prison officer there from Yorkshire called Mark Elliott, and I'd love him to listen to this. So basically, Mark Elliott used to take part in like these competitions outside, like in the 90s and early 2000s. They were kind of like CrossFit. And what he used to do in the Superstars competition at Christmas, he used to do exactly the same competition that he would do outside in there, because obviously he knew it like the back of his hand. That's what he did. That was his sport. And I remember it was like something like you would row 500 meters, you'd run 300 meters, you would do like 50 reps with 20 key on each end, bench press, shoulder press, and like lat pull down and like burpees and stuff. And it was like how quick you could do the whole mini circuit. And I literally just walked away with it. Like no one even got near me. And I remember the kid that won it like 3 years on a row. And he was distraught. He couldn't believe someone else come in. And I remember when I did it, Mark Elliott, the prison officer, come up to me and he just said, that is really, like, that's fucking quick. And I was like, I didn't even know, like, seriously, that is really, really fast. He went, because, like, I'm very impressed with that. He went, considering it's the first time you've ever done it. And then the next day, I went down the gym and I was in the strongman competition. Now, bear in mind, at this point, I was about 73 kilos. And there's guys that were like double my size. The width on them was like, literally, there was a guy in there, I remember this. He genuinely set the British record for bench press, but they couldn't get the record officiated because obviously he was in prison serving a life sentence. But I'm talking like mountains of men that just lift weights. And anyway, there's me, and you had to squat, bench press, and deadlift. And then they put all three of you like where you fitted. They had some scoring system. It was like bowler. They had a scoring system per like kilo body weight. And I remember in the whole prison, I come out third. And these guys are just like, this guy, like, he's just this tiny, like, I was in regards to how big they were. But I didn't make I didn't understand what athletic ability was. I didn't put the dots together and think, wow, like, I'm really good aerobically and I'm quite powerful as well. I didn't connect all that stuff up. And then the next year, competition again, walked away with it again, then got transferred out of that prison and then went to a lower security prison. And then when I got on the rowing machine and I started that process, obviously, like, then when Darren, the prison officer that worked, because you get in prison, you get PEIs, which are like prison officers that just work in the gym. And when he just walked behind me one day, and again, I wasn't training to get fit. I wasn't doing it for that reason. I didn't train to be an athlete. I was literally doing it because it was a form of escapism. But what happened, all of those hours on that rowing machine, I unintentionally woke up this ability in my body that I didn't really understand, and I understand what it was, and I didn't realize how good it was. Like, I knew in prison that, like, we had these charts in the prison gym, like concept 2 rowing charts, and like I knew in there, like, all of my times, it was like no one was even near me because we used to like write up our times, like our PBs, and no one was near me. But you're not in the real world; you're in prison. And then when Darren opened up my eyes to the real world, and he said, "This is how good you are," and he brought me in all these records. And then what he used to do as well, he used to bring me in like the bios of athletes that had some of these records. And I remember like reading them, and these guys that were like 2:30 marathon runners and 8.5 hour Ironman athletes that would set these records on a rowing machine. And I'm looking at these records thinking I can beat those records. So like it just put these seeds in my brain. And that was where sort of then I asked him if I could sort of attempt to break some of the records. And then, like, yeah, the rest is sort of history, really.
Just for those listening who don't know, could you just give us at least some of the records that you actually broke, just so everyone can get some actual context of what a crazy, crazy, crazy challenge that was?
The first record I asked to break was the British record for the marathon, which was 42,000 metres. And I broke that record by 7 minutes. And it was a very powerful, profound moment, because when I did break that one record, and that record always sticks out in regards to everything I ever did, because for that moment, when I did that and I was laying on that gym mat, everything I'd ever wanted as a kid, that wanted to be good at something and to achieve something in my life when I got older, I felt like that in that moment when I was on that mat. And that was then the fuel that thought, I can now use my body as a vehicle to the thing to get me out of this place and use it to turn my life around and really be successful at something. And that was the first record for the British record for the marathon. And then I broke the record for the half marathon. And then I broke the British record for the 10,000 meters. Then I broke the British record for the 1,000 meters. And then once I did that, I started looking at the longer stuff. Because what I noticed was when I used to look at my split times, the longer something went, the better I become and the bigger the margins that I could win by. Because I realized I wasn't very explosive, but I realized at this point, because I started reading books on athletes and training, and I started understanding about heart rate zones and sports nutrition and stuff. So once I started understanding this, I looked at the records that I broke and thought like the gaps were bigger the longer they were. So then I attempted to break the world record for the 100,000 meters. And yeah, like that was generally one of the hardest things I've ever done in sport. Like it genuinely, because I was in prison, I had no sports nutrition, I had no electrolyte tablets, I was eating Mars bars and Snicker bars as energy because I didn't have any like proper fuel. We had to make electrolyte drinks out of putting salt and like Ribena in bottles and mixing them up and stuff. And when I got to about 85,000 meters, I basically I can't explain the pain I was in my lats. My lats were like rippling, where I was literally, I was cramping up so bad. My lats had all these ripples in it and I could feel them locking up. And I just had to bite down and I broke the world record for the 100K. And then, yeah, that was incredible when I did that. That was one of the most proudest things I've ever done, because I can remember being on that rowing machine, and when it really started hurting, it kind of brought me back to when I got arrested. And like when the police arrested me and stuff, and I just thought, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to be a loser. I'm going to win. I'm going to achieve something. And I did it. And then when I did that, the governor of the prison, we asked him if I could attempt to break the world record for the most amount of meters rowed in 24 hours. And it was unheard of, like genuinely unheard of. Like to allow a prisoner out of his cell for 24 hours in prison is literally, how it happened, I even to this day, I still don't know. But he managed to get it cleared. And Darren, the prison officer, come in on his day off and sat with me for 24 hours. And I rode 165 miles in 24 hours. And that was tough psychologically, because I'd never done anything where, like, don't get me wrong, back in the day when I was going out and stuff, like I'd been up for 24 hours, but I'd never continuously exercised for 24 hours. It was a very different feeling sitting on this rowing machine. I felt like I was on drugs, like I was drifting in and out of sleep at like 4 o'clock in the morning. But again, I weathered the storm. And I remember Darren sitting next to me at 4 in the morning when I felt just awful. And he just said, I promise you, you will weather it. And when your body comes out of that cycle of sleep, about 6 o'clock, you'll just come out of it and you'll feel wide awake again. And I remember in 2 hours, I just said, look, I can't talk to you. Please just leave me on my own. And I just kept rowing and rowing and rowing. And then I did. I got to 6 o'clock in the morning and my body just woke back up. And then, I ended up, I think I broke that record by 13 miles in the end.
That is like just crazy. Do you think like it's similar? Because like, obviously when you said when you were like young, when you were a child and you had that kind of ambition and you wanted to be successful and that, do you think that's, you've always kind of had that drive, which has helped you in the sporting world? And like, because like, I get on the watt bike sometimes and I feel like even now, like I'll get on for an hour and I'm like 10 minutes in and I'm like, oh, am I going to make it to an hour? Or like, I've got these like thoughts in my head. Can I make it? Oh, do you want to stop? Like, it's like playing like, I mean, devil's advocate now. Obviously when I was swimming, it was a lot different, but you always kind of have those. Do you think like rowing for like 24 hours, like that is just crazy? Do you think like what was really driving you, what was pushing you on to just keep going and to keep pushing and to keep being quicker, breaking records again and again?
At that moment in my life, it was more the external, like when I went through that process of change, went to do something different, I didn't want to be, I didn't want my life to be known as a guy that spent years of his life in prison. I didn't want to be defined by prison. I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to recreate me. I wanted to be something different. That fueled me a lot. And in some regards, it became quite negative when I got out, because I was so determined and so hungry to be successful. Like I dug myself into this huge hole of overtraining, like huge. I had to have ECGs and I did an Ironman with viral fatigue. Got to the end of the Ironman, I had to have all sorts of like drips and anyway. But that moment in my life where the athlete side of it was a lot driven by the wanting to recreate myself. And again, it wasn't all great. Like when you realise you're very talented at something and you're trapped in prison, that became one of the most frustrating parts of my whole prison sentence. It was the fact that when I did everything on the rowing machine and it was all completed, it was like, well, I'm trapped. I can't do anything with it. And I'm looking at the dates and the days and the days and the weeks and the months and then drift into another year. And I realised I've got this ability and I can't use it. I didn't want to keep using it in prison. I wanted to go out into the real world and use it. Because then I felt like I was wasting it. I realised I discovered it late in my life. And now I'm wasting it now, because now I know I've got it and I've done stuff with it. I want to do more stuff with it. And that became really frustrating, like really, really frustrating. Like I remember when I went on my first parole hearing to get released. I've been in there for 7 years. And I remember the judge, a Crown Court judge has to come in, you have to sit in front of him. And he said to me, what are you going to do when you get released from prison? I said, I'm going to be an athlete. And he laughed and he said, I've never heard a prisoner ever come in front of me in all these years I've sat these parole hearings. But I believed it. Like I visualized it every day. I read a book in prison called The Secret about the laws of attraction. And when I was on that rowing machine, I did realize I was good. I visualized every day on that machine, when I get out, I'll be an athlete. When I get out, I'll be an athlete. When I get out, I'll be an athlete. And I knew it would come. And I used to manifest it. And the judge didn't let me out. He refused my release. And he said my release plan wasn't based in reality, which I totally understand now. Back then, he probably thought I was like, I lost the plot because I've been in there so long. But what he did do, they moved me to an open prison. And they said to me, go to the open prison, do your level 3 training qualifications to be a personal trainer. And at least you got a plan B. And that's what I did. And I went there. And I started going out working every day voluntarily at the local gym. And I just carried on training. And I just kept thinking, I want to keep my body in the best shape I can. And at the beginning, when I got out, I wanted to row. That was what my dream was. Like, I watched the 2012 Olympics in prison. So I was inspired by that. I started researching it. I understood where my rowing machine times were in relation to like Olympic rows and stuff. And I thought, I'm not that far off. Like, I can still do it. But through swimming, rowing's exactly the same. Very technical sport. If you come out at 29 years old, like, I started going up against guys that have been rowing since they were 16 years old, and they had the same physiology as me, if not better. And I just took up the sport too late. But yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Like I said at the start, everything happens for a reason. And well, I like to believe so. And there's so many people in your story that have made such a positive impact on where you are now and helped you change the way you saw things or the way that you felt about things. I would just like to give a personal thanks to Darren because we now, he obviously had a massive impact on your story, and so many people all over the world get to hear the story and learn from it, which is absolutely amazing. First of all, did Darren know anything about rowing, or did he just literally do whatever he could to help you out? And second, do you still speak to Darren? That was one of the burning questions I had when I read the book. I was like, does he still speak to Darren, or what's going on?
So again, when you look at it and you say how the stars align, so Darren, when me and him sort of come across each other in this gym in Nottingham, in this prison gym, Darren, though he was a prison officer, he also was like a mountaineer. Like he went out to I think it was the North Pole. He went to Greenland. He used to climb. He liked riding. He was into endurance sport. And so again, there was a lot of synergy when he saw what he saw in me, that ability. He recognised it from the beginning because he understood about endurance sport. Even though he didn't specialise in rowing, he still understood about athletes because he used to read. He's a very compassionate man, empathetic, an amazing personality, very, very jovial. So when he came into my life, it was just like this glue. There was no obstacles to me and him not getting on at that moment in time. Now, John, 4 years before that, would have had barriers up, and I wouldn't even entertained him. I wouldn't have spoke to him. He would have probably still tried to engage with me, but I would have just had the barrier up, and I wouldn't have engaged with him because he was a prison officer. He was on the other side. He was on the other team. He wasn't on my team. And yeah, he didn't know anything about rowing, but he did everything he could to increase my knowledge base of it. And he used to print stuff off the internet. He'd bring me in books. I remember reading James Cracknell's books when I was in prison. And Darren brought those in for me. And to answer your second question, yes, I am still in contact with Darren Knight. He's up to this point, he's never missed an Ironman race I've ever done. He's been to all of them and his family, his wife, and I've met his daughter at one of my races, and I've met his family away from races as well. He's even stayed at my house. He come down because he still lives up north, and he come down to my house and he attended an event with me last year at Parliament. He's a trustee on my foundation. He's one of the trustees on that. We're in regular contact with each other, and he will be to the sort of the day that I die. Without him, I wouldn't be where I am today, because even when I was in there, I could have been the greatest athlete that's ever walked the planet. But I needed someone to help me. I was in an environment where I couldn't do anything with it. Like, I was locked in there, and he allowed me that tiny gap of light just to escape it, even though I was still locked inside, to be able to demonstrate that ability and be supportive of me. And he has been from then all the way through to today. And he's always there. If I ever need him, or he ever needs me, like, I'm always there for him.
It's just so special. I think seeing like the impact that just one person can have at the right time in someone's life. And yeah, we talk about it all the time, and it's like being kind and doing what you can to help people, because you never know what position people can be in. But for him to make such a difference and an impact on your life, and to, I guess, give you that belief, confidence, and showing you all the things and bringing things in for you to read, it's like just so special. So obviously when you came out, Rowan was in the forefront of your mind. So obviously we talk now about Ironman, and you've just said about Darren's never missed a race. How soon was it that you were like, oh, I want to give an Ironman a go? Because from what I hear, there wasn't actually that much training that you did before your first Ironman?
To condense this part of it, when I got released from prison, I got out on a Friday, and on a Saturday I joined this rowing club in London called London Rowing Club, which at that moment in time was a high performance centre for lightweight rowing. So because I'm under 75 kilos, if you wanted to be an international rower, you would probably join London Rowing Club if you lived in London. It was the feeder system into the international setup. So I joined this club, and I just remember how bizarre it was at the beginning, because like I go from being in prison to then on a Tuesday night sitting next to Sophie Hoskins, that she was the first female to ever win an Olympic gold medal at London 2012 in the women's lightweight double. And I remember watching her on the telly, and then suddenly she's sitting next to me on a rowing machine. And then you had a guy called Rob Williams that won a silver medal, and there was an international rower there, Bill Lucas, and all these guys went to the London Olympics, and then suddenly they're all sitting around me. And I loved it. And I realised where I had to improve, and I started to understand more about the sport, and I needed to be able to single scull, and I got private coaching, and I did get good in regards of being complete novice, like having no knowledge of rowing on the water really, to being able to like row competently on the River Thames. Like my progression was really quick, and even the coach there, like he was an Australian, Phil. And he coached Olympic athletes back in Australia. And I remember, like, he used to have this quote, and you probably may have experienced it through swimming. And he used to say, "You cannot coach what God's given you." And he was massively on physiology. And he thought it was his job as a coach. If you had physiology, you had the engine, he could coach you to become a good rower. And he did put a lot of time into me, and he helped me. But I'm a realist, and it wasn't giving up. Like, I wanted to be an athlete. But I realised I took up the sport too late. I just turned 30 at this point. And then I was looking around, and I just thought, I'm not going to get to that level. And I found it frustrating, because it's a team sport. So even though I was very driven, I was sometimes with athletes that wasn't as driven as me, and I used to find it quite frustrating. And then when I was in prison, I remember watching Channel 4 one morning on a Sunday morning, and there was a programme called Transworld Sport on Channel 4. And I just remember when I was in prison, this episode of Ironman was featured at the Hawaii World Championships. And I pulled back on it. I drawed back on it. And I remembered it. And I was like, Ironman. And actually, when I was in prison, I wrote a blog, and I used to put it up on the prison gym wall about when I got out, what I wanted to do. And I said, I wanted to do an Ironman when I was in prison. And then when I realised I couldn't get to the level I wanted to get to in rowing, I just basically went on Google, and I Googled Ironman, and I started researching it, because I had no interest when I first got out of prison, because it was all about rowing. And then when I started researching it, I realised that Ironman races all around Europe, all around the world. My limiting factor at that moment was the fact, because I just got released from prison, I was on a licence, so I wasn't allowed to leave Britain. So then I thought, right, what races are in Britain? And they had Ironman UK or Ironman Wales, and Ironman Wales was in the sea. So up to this point, I can't swim. So like literally the last time I touched water probably was probably having a vodka and orange in the Med in southern Spain. That was the nearest I ever went to do any form of physical activity in water, like drunk. So I didn't want to swim in the ocean in September in Wales, in Tenby. So I was like, what can I do? So Ironman UK, go on there, try to enter it. And I couldn't enter it because it was sold out. It was 6 weeks before the race. So I was like, right, when I carried on researching, I realised I could get a charity spot. So I entered for a charity spot, and I got it. And then I thought, right, I've got 6 weeks now to learn how to swim. I had to go and buy a bike off eBay. I had, like, when I got out of prison, I had no money or anything really when I come out. Like I was living at my mum's in the spare bedroom, but that was better than going to a bow hostel. So I'm living with my mum. I'm 30 years old. I've hardly got any money. So I have to go on eBay and I buy this bike. It was a Moda, and it was about 2 sizes too big for me. But if I showed you the pictures, I looked like a little ant midget on it. And I bought this bike, and then I just had to teach myself how to swim. Like I'd go down to Hyde Park to Serpentine. I got this wetsuit, and obviously the wetsuit helped me a lot. And then I just used to watch YouTube videos and to teach myself how to breathe and swim and sort of get competent. And then basically the day of the race, Ironman UK, it was the furthest I'd ever swum in my life, was 3.8k, and the furthest I'd ever ridden the bike. Like I can remember when I was on the bike, I got to 80k and thought, I've never ridden past this point. And then I had to then ride 180k. So I had to have 100k, and then I had to get off and run a marathon. anyway, when I did the whole thing, I just remember running down this carpet at Manchester, this red carpet, Manchester town centre. It was absolutely pissing down with rain. And I honestly, it was probably one of the most emotional experiences the most happy emotional experience I've ever had in my life, where like literally I felt like I was going to cry, like, because I watched this episode of Ironman in prison, and then I got out of prison. I've been out for 6 months, and in 6 weeks I decided to do Ironman UK, and then I'm running down this carpet and I've done it, and I didn't do that bad. Like I was even shocked. Like even I can remember, like it's not so impressive now. You'll probably laugh, but when I started mixing with triathletes and people that did Ironman, like I swam 107 in an Ironman, right? From basically no swimming whatsoever. I couldn't swim. And even they were bemused and said, I cannot believe you swam that fast for 6 weeks worth of swimming that you've never swum before. And you managed to swim 107 for 3.8K, which I know isn't fast, but at that time, like I knew people that did triathlon and they couldn't even swim that fast doing an Ironman. So it was something that I've always dined out on. But that was where the journey then of Ironman started. And it was a very positive experience at the very beginning. And then I just met amazing people and riding my bike and getting a little bit better at swimming and better at running.
I mean, there's so much to say on that point, because I can see Jazz is unmuted as well. So I'm sure Jazz has got a question or just something to say. I think you just said I taught myself how to swim in 6 weeks. That's not possible, John. So you are a superhuman, just by the way. I mean, there's so much to it. Going from rowing, I understand it is incredibly technical. Just from me, I mean, they put me in one of those big inflatable type of yellow boats that you can't capsize. And I was in that, and even like trying to do some of the skills at the start was difficult. So then obviously you went into Ironman, taught yourself how to swim in 6 weeks, which is unbelievable, because the amount of prep for people who are doing Ironman and the training and getting the nutrition right and everything, the fact that you did that is unbelievable. And getting your nutrition right, you just threw yourself in. Like you said, you got to 80K and you were like, this is the furthest I've ever been. And it must have been such an emotional finish, like you just said. I can't imagine what that must have felt like. And in the book, I think you go through 3 Ironmans. The second one, you were incredibly ill. And I know you've touched on that so far. How you finished that race, I have no idea. Again, I was reading the book and I was like, I don't know if I can finish this chapter. Never mind, John finished the race. Can you just touch on that a little bit and how that changed the way you looked at training afterwards?
Yeah, like, so what I did that, so like I said a little while ago, that when I realised I had an athletic ability, and then I expressed that through rowing, and I was successful doing it. Obviously, like what I then did, I took that sort of mindset of the way I was training in prison. So for instance, before I understood properly about training, I'd sit on a rowing machine and I would progressively just row, and my body would just adapt. And I would get faster and faster. And then I understood a little bit more about training. I understood about intervals and stuff. And then what happened when I got out, I applied that sort of method to Ironman and to training. But obviously, I'm doing 3 sports in one. So like what I was doing was I just thought if I kept running, my body's going to adapt. Now, because I was athletically talented, I had an ability, my body did. And so when I started running, I just progressively got quicker. So like I can remember, I don't, because it can come across as quite egotistical, and it's not. It's just, but this is what encouraged me to keep doing what I was doing. So like I went from basically like not really running to suddenly within like 8 weeks I could run a sub-3-hour marathon. So like I go through this process of doing these things, and then I started riding the bike, and then when I started understanding about power numbers on a watt bike, and then I'm seeing the numbers that I could generate, my power and stuff to my weight. And then, so what I'll do is keep trying to progressively just get more and more stronger and powerful. And it did. My body kept adapting. And also, again, it doesn't help when you're sitting on a watt bike next to an Olympic rower, the same weight as me, and he's pushing like 360, 70 watts for half hour, and I'm chasing him, and then I'm getting off. And then later on that day, I'm doing like a 2-hour run or an hour. So you're seeing, so all these things combined together, my body just wasn't recovering, and I was just putting just too much heavy load into my body, too regular. And then I ended up breaking down basically. And then I got sick before the race and I got the viral infection. And then I raced, and that race that just sent me off the edge of the cliff. I just completely run my body down into the ground. And then that was when I had to have the ECG on my heart. The doctors thought I might have done some damage to my heart. I didn't, thankfully. But then off that, what that then taught me was and again, it's a learning, you go through growth and learning. What was hard for me was, one, my distrust of other people. So when I got out, even though I changed, there were still things inside me that I found hard to let go of. Like, I believed at the beginning, if something's your dream, it's your dream. No one wants it more than you. And I found it hard to trust someone else to help me reach that goal through training. Like, I didn't want to hand my dream over to someone else for them to write me a training program for me to follow if I didn't trust them. And I didn't trust anyone, or hardly anyone. So that was very difficult for me. And then when I broke down that bad, and I was so embarrassed, like when I broke down that bad, I remember when I was being sick on the marathon and I was walking, and this old lady come up to me in the town centre in Bolton, and I was throwing up into this bush, and she said, "Just don't give up." And I just remember, like, she patted me and she said, "Just don't give up, keep going." And I just felt so humiliated. And I just remember I got to the end of the finish line and I just felt like I'd let people down that come up to watch me, and they driven up from London, and I just felt embarrassed. And I think I've always been good at assessing stuff, and I realised I didn't have the skills to coach myself. I just didn't have them. That isn't what I do. And that's when I had to I had to reach out to someone, and I was very lucky because there was a guy that lived next to me that I just one day bumped into, and he was an amazing Ironman athlete called Keith Sanders. And Keith raced that race that I raced, and he qualified for the World Championships. And anyway, he ran past me on the run, and I didn't see him. I didn't see him all day. Like, he was gone. He was gone up the road. I didn't see him. And he messaged me a couple of days after, and he said, "What happened to you?" And I said, like, "Yeah, mate." I went, I just basically fell apart. And obviously, because he followed me on like Strava and stuff, so he saw what I was doing, and he said, like, "You are much better than that." Like, he went, "I've seen what you're doing, like your training runs and how far you're riding and stuff like that." And he went, like, "You just need structures of what you're doing." And he went, "Look, like, I'm not a coach, but I can help you." And he went to the World Championships and he come back, and then he started coaching me. And then that was a game changer for me. It was a game changer. And it was ironic because he said, the irony with you, it's not getting you to do more, it's making you do less, because you always want to do too much, too hard. Because to me, I made this analogy again of like suffering in training meant I really wanted it. So when I started breaking down, like, and feeling like crap, like waking up in the morning like I had a hangover, or like when I was running, like sometimes my legs felt dead. I was on the bike and I just didn't feel good, but I still did that hard session. I still did it because to me, I thought the more suffering I go through now just shows me how much I want to achieve this goal. But obviously it was detrimental to me, and it wasn't, and it ended up sort of it set me back. But then in a thing, if I wouldn't have fallen apart as bad as I did, I may have not then reached out to Keith for the help that he ended up giving me.
I mean, doing an Ironman, like, on its own, just the thought of it is like, whoa, like doing an Ironman and being fully fit, feeling great. Well, start with feeling great at the start line, but like not feeling 100%, having like a virus or whatever, like I just can't even begin to imagine like how hard and challenging that just adds. But I guess in a way it kind of, makes you think that you can actually overcome, like that you're getting through things, like completing an Ironman with the virus and all this kind of the mindset that I think, like, however many people would have like stopped, or when you're being sick on the side and like people would have like pulled off and like finished, but you actually got through it. And like, it's just incredible. Like, so when, like, where did it go from there? Was it just like, obviously you said about the coach then come on board, was it just like, oh, now we're going to start focusing on the next Ironman? And obviously when did you actually start sharing your story? When did it start to, people like wanted to hear this amazing story of where you'd come from and the big change and going from competing Ironmans? When did that start to come around?
So in regards to the story element of it, so when I got out, I joined the rowing club, and I didn't want anyone to know about my past because I was ashamed of it. And I joined this rowing club. I'm ran with these Olympic athletes. There's people there that are doctors. They've done amazing things with their life for charity. They climbed Mount Everest. There's just like you can imagine, like type A personalities at rowing club, all high achievers. I go in there and I made amazing friends, like just as me as a person, nothing else. So I went in, didn't want anyone to know about my past, didn't tell anyone anything about any records, because the first thing you would see back then if you went on Google was the Sun, the Mirror, the Times, all these national newspapers with like, Arm Robber Gets Life, Arm Robber Gets Life. So I didn't want anyone to find out about my past. And I tried to keep myself under the radar in that regard of like the sporting prowess part of it. So I didn't want anyone to know. And basically, to cut a long story short, that worked for like 5 or 6 months. But then when people start realizing there was a rower there called James Lindsay Flynn, and he was a world champion. And he was coaching one night, the novices on the ergo. And he come up to me at the end and he went, "There is no way you're holding splits like that and you haven't been rowing for years." And I said, "Yeah, like I did a bit of gym rowing and stuff." He said, "There's no way." And I think like people started seeing that I was much better than just some random guy that just turned up and started rowing. And then I kind of found out that someone had found out about my past. And again, it was then I had to make a decision. I wanted to control the narrative. I wanted to have ownership of it. I wanted to be the one to be able to tell people, like, people will have opinions of me regardless of whatever I do in my life. And I genuinely don't care. Like, I do what I do. And it doesn't matter if you're Mother Teresa, people always critique you. It doesn't matter what you're doing. I've experienced it. So I really don't care what other people think. But I wanted to be the one that just put my side of it across. And if you didn't like that, and you still didn't like it, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. Read it. Don't like me. Hate me. You want me to go. That's absolutely cool with me. I'm good. So I did that, and I wrote a blog. And I remember I published it. The blog went out, and I can remember, like, I was even shocked by the response it got within the rowing community. British Rowing shared it, and then all these like publications within the rowing community. And what was nice about it was the fact that when people read it, because they knew me as who I am now or then, it broke their preconceptions of what they thought someone like me would be like. Now, if I would have turned up as a guy that just served 2 life sentences for armed robbery or conspiracy to rob and joined a high performance rowing club, would I have been welcomed as much as I was? I don't know. I probably wouldn't have been. But I did build up these friendships with people, and it made people look at other people differently, which was a positive thing. And then from that, obviously, when it started getting shared, I did more and more interviews. And I would say the defining interview I did was with Sir Trevor McDonald on BBC Radio 4. And it was about redemption and my interpretation of what redemption was, and the fact that everyone can change. It's possible for everyone. Anyone, it doesn't matter. You don't have to go to prison. It could be, you want to do something different with your life, you can do it. We've all got the ability to do it. And off that interview, that's where like the opportunity comes to write a book. And like, I honestly, like, I didn't see the value in what I did. I'm me. I'm nothing. I don't think I'm not anything special. I'm just a human being on earth. And I've gone through what I've gone through in my life. That's been my journey. And I never really understood the impact it could have over other people. And it amazed me. And it still does amaze me to today. Like, sometimes I get emails or messages from people that are depressed and drug addicts and alcoholics and people that are in bad places in their life, and they've read my book, and like, some of the most incredible stories and how it's impacted people's lives. But like, again, I'm just me. I just do what I do, and I never really understood at that point the impact that I could have over other people's lives in regards of a positive impact that it could awaken other people, and the stories of people going to prison and reading my book in prison and coming out and turning their lives around because of it. And even when we said before we come on air about the books that I donated in the lockdown to the young offenders in the UK prison system. So obviously the kids can't get in contact with me, but I've had parents message me saying, "My son read your book. it's completely changed his life in prison. Like he can see that he can achieve something in his life, and that's where that growth of what life's about for me has evolved massively over the last 4 years. And it's like what my significance is on earth and what I'm here for and what we're all here for. And I realized that it was like when I was a young kid, I attached everything to wealth and accumulation of wealth. And to me, being a millionaire when I was 21 was a milestone. Being a multi-millionaire, having multi-million pounds, a big house, and when I was in my 30s, and all these goals that I set myself financially, and then going to prison and then realising I was good at sport, and it was about the records, and it was about that constant wanting more. Think I'd be defined. My legacy would be being defined by how good I was at running, or like how good I was at sitting on a machine pulling a handle towards me. And what I come to realise is actually legacy was always about, and is always about, just helping other people. And the more I've done that, the more I realised that when I've gone, like that's what you will be remembered by, how many people's lives you've touched and how many people's lives are better because they've come into contact with you. And don't get me wrong, like I've done a lot of damage in my life. Like when I was a young man, I was selfish to a degree. I think I had some of my mum's characteristics, but like obviously the stuff I engaged in, very selfish. It's all about you. It was all about me making money. You dehumanize certain groups of people, and I feel again like when I look back on my life now, I feel ashamed of it. Like the way I perceive prison officers and police officers and people that work for government and stuff. Like I feel embarrassed by it, the way my thoughts and my behaviour. But yeah, like to me today, legacy is all about sort of just giving back, really, and just trying to help as many people as you can and bettering their lives. And when the lights go out, it's like hopefully people will say that I did good things for people. It wasn't just all bad and negative.
Yeah, definitely. And just there's been so many goosebump moments. I don't know about you, Jazz, but even just listening to you talk, I've probably got goosebumps about 20 times just from so many things you say. And your story and what you've been through in your life, the ability to change against all odds, defying the odds, all those things. With a great story comes great pressure. And I follow you on social media everywhere, and you're always so positive and trying to help people and all that sort of stuff. But do you ever feel pressure with that responsibility? Because like you've just said, you've changed so many people's lives, and unfortunately you had to suffer through a lot through your life. But now the impact that's had on so many people, it will have saved lives, not just people in prison, but outside of prison. Every aspect of your story can help someone. And so I just wondered if you ever feel pressure from that, or if you just feel privileged to have that power.
No, yeah, I've never felt pressure, but I definitely feel like it's a huge privilege to be able to have that connection with other humans, that to be able to sort of like shape someone else's thoughts is a massive privilege, and I would never abuse it, because yeah, like. It's the greatest gift you can ever really have, isn't it? Like you can shape the minds of adults and children, and and sometimes I've even been in meetings before where like you're with government ministers and they're getting upset, and you're talking to them, and I realised that like it's a tremendous privilege to be able to access these places, because at the beginning, like I'm not silly. Like when I was asked to do certain things, where a couple of years ago. I got asked to speak at the Conservative Party conference, and it's John, the performing seal. That's what they want. They want you to go there to tell an amazing story, right? And say how good the criminal justice system is and how people can be rehabilitated and stuff. And to be fair, the minister that asked me to go, Dr. Philip Lee, he is genuinely an incredible man. He really is. Like he's compassionate. And just a very good soul. And he genuinely believed in sport could change the prison system, and he wanted it to be a fundamental pillar of rehabilitation. And that's why he asked me to speak. But I knew when I was going, obviously, people that come to that part of where I was, a lot of them had just been like the entertainment side of it. But once I'm up and I've got that mic, I can say what I want, and no one can really switch me off. And then it's about using that platform. And again, when you've got that platform and that voice, it's about opening up people's mindsets up, and it's about showing people that people can change. And I remember like when I got off stage at the end, this lady come up to me. She was a Conservative MP, and she just said, "I cannot compute that you was in prison for 10 years after just seeing what I've seen up there." And I said, "But you must understand, I'm no different to those other 90,000 people that are in prison. Like, I am no different. Like, I was once really that piece of shit that a lot of people think people are that end up in prison." So for me to be able to have that position where I'm able to stand up in front of that group of people and maybe see someone that's kind of like, doesn't necessarily believe in rehabilitation and believes in you should lock people up and throw away the key, to change their mind, I understand what a privilege that is that I've got, that I'm able to do that. And also, again, just with people in general. And like I said, like some of the stories I've heard over the years of when people have messaged me and stuff and think positive things they took away from me, I've never felt the pressure of it. I just see it as being a tremendous privilege to be able to have that positive impact over people's lives.
It is just like incredible having that voice. But even when you look, say, on your social media and like the quotes and the things that you say and how much it can actually make a difference to people's lives, it's like so inspiring. But like, I think it'll actually be really interesting, like what makes John happy now? Like, what do you enjoy? What do you love? Obviously we see like on social media and obviously we see it, but it'd be great for everyone to hear like what makes you happy now? What really makes you happy? What do you enjoy doing now?
Do you know, well, obviously I know if you follow me, but my I come out to the mountains. I've been out over the last few years. So I was coming out in training camps, but 2 years ago, nearly to the day actually, because I had 2 life sentences where I got released from prison, I didn't have freedom of movement. I wasn't allowed to leave Britain without asking permission. So every time I did leave to go on a race, when I come back, I had to go and see my probation officer. It all had to be cleared by the probation service. And it was a headache. Like, I couldn't just go on holiday when I felt like it. I couldn't just go and do a race because a race popped up somewhere. And I used to be offered all these opportunities to go and race at things and even work stuff. Like I got asked to go to New Zealand and Norway and Iceland. And I could never do any of it because I wasn't allowed to leave Britain, only for a very short period of time to do races and come back or maybe do a short training camp. Anyway, 2 years ago, the Secretary of State at the time basically signed me off. He relinquished all my license conditions. So I was basically, I'm not a completely free man, but I haven't got any license conditions anymore. So I'm still on life license. I could still go back to prison and be recalled back to prison, but I haven't got the conditions like I can live where I want now. I can travel where I want now. I don't have to ask for anyone's permission to do that or the probation service. So when that happened, I'd never traveled because I wasn't able to. I was in prison for 10 years, come out. And then all the years I was out of prison, which was like 6.5, I wasn't able to just freely travel like other people was. And I remember people go on holiday in the summer, they go and watch the Tour de France, and I'd get invited and I could never go. And then when that restriction got took off me, I did start going around. I started going to Europe, and even though I come to the mountains a lot, of quite a few times during the course when I was in that period of having for a week at a time, when I was here for a long period of time, I just realised how much I love this place. Like I've never in my life, it's hard for me to explain, the connection I feel like I've got with this place. I would honestly say the only thing I've ever loved more than this is my mum. And I mean that. And that's not me being cheesy. I genuinely mean it. I get up every morning and I feel so much gratitude and so grateful to be completely immersed in nature, so much. And I ride my bike in the mountains and it's like being in a piece of artwork. And I just feel like I've never, obviously because I was in prison for so many years, and before I went to prison, I was living in Spain and I was in Holland, and the police were always watching me, and I always had that around me, and I never felt contentment. I never felt happy. I've always felt very transient. I've always been moving a lot. I've never had control of my environment. And that was years before I went to prison, then being in prison. And when I come out of prison, and I never felt anywhere in my life where I felt that contentment and happiness. And I come here and I found it. And then I was like, no one's taking this away from me. No one's taking it away from me. This is where I want to spend my life. I want to live here. I don't want it to be a vacation that I come on for 2 weeks or a week every year. I want to wake up every morning and I want to live in the mountains. I want to see animals. I want to be around animals, and like it even made me stop eating meat. It had such a profound impact over my life, like being there. And it's the only thing I think I've ever genuinely loved in my life, other than my mum. And I know it sounds quite cheesy, and I'm not a very emotional person, but there's been times where like I've been out on my bike for 5 hours, and obviously I'm getting these massive hits of endorphins. And like, I remember one day I was riding my bike and I had Coldplay on, and I've been out for 4.5 hours. And I remember descending off this mountain, and I nearly started crying. I was like, this is the most unbelievable experience I've ever been through in my life. And I want to feel like that every day. Like I want to get up. Like I walk to the laundrette because I haven't got a washing machine where I live. I'm sitting in the laundrette and I'm looking out, and you just got all these mountains and outside the laundrette. I'm like, I'm done. Like I love this. Like this is where I want to spend my life. And I'm very fortunate that I found it, and I found that place in my life. And that's why I'm now, again, as your life evolves and you grow and keep growing, like now I realise one of my, like what I love doing is being able to like open this place up to other people and bring other people out here that would never necessarily get to experience. And the way it makes me feel, like when my mates come out for the first time and we're riding a bike and their jaws are on the floor and they're riding, they're looking around. And it was a bit of a joke last year when my friends were coming out riding with me, and I said, where we're going to go in a minute, it's going to be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. And every time I said it, I kept saying it, repeating it. It was, and my mate went, we were taking the mick out of me behind my back. And he went, but every time you do say it, it's genuinely like we look and go, oh my God. And my mate was like, it's just the most amazing place he's ever been in his life. And so it's now like I want to be able to sort of gift that to other people and open this place up to them.
It's honestly so nice to see you light up when you talk about where you live right now. And you wake up there every morning, look out your window and have those views. I wake up and open your Instagram story to get those views. So thank you for that. But there was a couple of things I wanted to ask you just quickly. One was if you're still close to your mum, but I think you've just answered that question by saying, you know, you love her so much. And that was more from a question of my mum. When we shut the book, we were both like, so does he still speak to his mum, or what, you know, what's going on there? And the second question was, you've done so many incredible things within sport, so many amazing achievements. If you could go back and relive the finish of any of them, which one would you pick? Which was the proudest moment, really, and you just were euphoric from it?
I think it will, in the regards of what stayed with me to this day, was when I broke the world record for the most distance rode in 24 hours. It ended up just, when I first did it, there was gym officers and they'd let some prisoners in to watch me finish it off. And everyone cleared out the gym, and it was me and Darren in the gym, just us two. And I was hammered. Like I was generally hammered. I was just laying on this blue gym mat. And Darren said to me, you've got a gift. And he went, you've got a gift that you can suffer. And he went, if you waste that when you get out of this, the biggest travesty I've ever seen as a prison officer. And that moment in just doing what I did has lived with me to this day. And every time I race to this day, and I'm at the back end of a marathon in an Ironman, and I'm in a world of pain, right? And I mean, like, you hurt, and obviously because you can process the pain, because obviously you're running a marathon, so you've got that time to have that mental dialogue. It's so long. I always remember those words that he said to me, and I think that, and that's why I would never quit, because I just always remember it's a gift, it's an ability. Don't waste it.
It's like amazing. I think all of us share the same passion of like sport, exercise, moving, trying to get people to try it out. You never know what sport, again, if you might not have had those experiences or given something a go, given Ironman, rowing, you wouldn't be where you are today. So I think it's just so powerful, the impact and what sport can do. But like, if I was to ask you, like, what does sport mean to you now? What does it do? Like, how does it make you feel? Obviously, you're training for Ironman, and well, hopefully an Ironman coming up at some point. How does it make you feel, and what does sport mean to you now?
You know what? It's quite a funny one, actually, because like when I train now, it's weird, because again, you go through it, where I feel like I've grown so much in my life, and I've got older, and I see life through different prisms and my life experiences and people I've interacted with. like, I know again it might come across as being quite cheesy, but like I do generally there's this in-linked spiritual side of me to exercising, and I do get I would find it challenging to do stuff like yoga and Pilates, and sometimes I listen to podcasts where people reach these higher states of meditation, and I find it very hard to switch my brain off because of the way I am. But when I genuinely, like when I'm running when I'm cycling, it's like I reach that state of being, and it's like it's like a meditative state. And obviously, like I know there's a chemical reaction going on with the endorphins in my brain, and obviously it's making me feel amazing. But like it is this powerful. Like the other day, I was doing this 2.5 hour run, and I got to like 2 hours, and I was just like, I just felt this wave of like, I was just transcending out my body, and I can't find that state in anything else. When I listen to people like talk about meditation for yoga and Pilates and sitting there and switching off and going Zen, I find that through exercising. I always have, but I was never able to put anything to it. Like I didn't really believe in spirituality like 5 years ago when I was sitting in prison. It was more about the transcending out of the prison, but actually it was the same thing. It lifted me out of a place mentally, psychologically and physically. Like I felt like I wasn't in there. But now obviously I'm more aware of it. That's kind of like, that's what I'm doing like when I'm out. And also when you are doing those hard sessions, the whole mind just shuts down and all you're focused on. Like I was doing a time trial the other day up a mountain. And when I was going up, I was on the rivet, and it's like everything just blacks out. Like your mind just becomes fixated on that number, on that bike. And it's like all the stuff going on around you, like the COVID and the news and everything just goes mute. And all you're doing is just looking at that meter on the top of that bike and just in that zone. And I just love that feeling. I love it.
And there's so many things that you're doing, great things that you're doing now with the story you've got and everything you've learnt and just everything. You've mentioned that you gave out books to prisons this year, and you know there's so much going on. I did see on social media the other day that you're flying people out to where you are to be able to train and stuff like that. I'd love for you to just quickly talk a bit about that and just let people know. And also, how do I get a place on that?
A little bit too old now. I think you might be a little bit too old. But yeah, like I said, like this place, the mountains, has had such a massive impact on my personal life. Being in nature, being around animals. I want to be able to open this up to other people that would never necessarily be given the opportunity to come to a place like this, through opportunity or the finances to even do it, or even have the awareness that this place actually exists. So I'm an ambassador for a charity in London called Football Beyond Borders. And I wanted to bring a group of young people out here last summer, but COVID stopped that. Anyway, everything that's happened with COVID, this is needed more now than ever before. So I spoke to the CEO of Football Beyond Borders, and I said, look, like I know it's very unpredictable at the moment, but I think we just sort of have to bite the bullet and just do it. We have to just put something together. So this summer, FBB have just launched an application process for young people in their charity in London from very disadvantaged communities to apply to come on a week trip to the mountains in the summer, the end of August, and they're going to get to like cycle, hike, horse ride, swim. Every day they're going to watch the sunrise. Every evening they're going to get to see the sunset, and they're going to get to experience being in nature. Now, most of these young people would probably, and this isn't an exaggeration, most of them would have probably never been out of London before. Definitely not ever left the United Kingdom to ever go on holiday. So it'll be the first ever sort of experience of leaving the country, getting on a ferry, driving across another country. The parameters for them to come is they will keep an activity diary building up into coming out. So it's going to require them to do a minimum of 2 hours exercise per week. And they're going to have to learn very sort of basic French words as in a bit of an educational thread running through it. And they're going to be like the pilot. So these kids coming out this summer, that's the first charity, Football Beyond Borders, and then there's another charity that's going to come out a few weeks after that. and they're going to be the two pilots that I want to then develop and basically run all year round. So in the summer season, we bring more kids out, and I'll be able to scale it up more once we see what works, what doesn't work. And in the winter, do like ski and snowboarding camps for kids and bring them out. Kids that would never be given the opportunity to ever experience what it feels like to ski. And again, I just love that feeling of being able to open this place up to other people, because I've got no doubt that those kids that come out, it could be, and I think it would be a profoundly impactful trip for them to go on, just to open up their minds to how big the world is, and the world is bigger than their postcodes. And again, whatever happens in life, those kids, when they grow up and become adults, will always remember when they were kids, they went out to the mountains, and it's kind of like I will always live with them somehow in that memory in their brains, and that's a lovely feeling to know that I can gift them that, and being able to open this beautiful place up to them.
You just never know, like one experience or one opportunity, what difference it can make to someone's life. And I just think, all right, it's just going to be amazing, and it's going to be so exciting to see that. So lastly, obviously, I know we've been talking to you for a long time. What does the future hold for John McAvoy? Are we going to see you in a swimming event anytime soon?
Yeah, I don't necessarily. Well, I think if there's a swimming event connected to a triathlon, maybe. I think the future. What does the future hold? I think really the end game. If I had the end game, if I even get to that point, if I live that long, would probably be. I want to get some donkeys and horses and have them on some land in the mountains and have a little donkey sanctuary and bring people out in the mountains in the summer and the winter. But before I get to that point in my life where I'm a little old man living on the side of a mountain, I just want to keep sort of. I'm gonna race. Hopefully do the London Marathon. Hopefully do Ironman Hamburg. Hopefully do triathlons in between that I'm scheduling to race, but they're already starting to fall away as it is. And everything's getting postponed. But even if they do, like I'm still getting in shape. I do endurance challenges over the summer. I want to Everest some mountains, ride up and down, so I cover Everest on some of them. And I in the short term, doing that racing wise and just really, I'll try to open up the mountains to as many people as I can, really, from back in the UK and just sort of keep just trying to have a positive impact in the world and just being a sort of a good person and just keep growing myself, like learning different language, trying. I'm very much trying. It's very frustrating trying to learn a language but I forgot how old I am, but trying to...
Go on, give us some French.
Yeah, come on.
I could say Je voudrais un café, s'il vous plaît. But I'm sort of... It's quite a frustrating process that you go through. It's like learning to swim. You think you're learning, and then like someone speaks to me, and then suddenly I just freeze because I can't have a conversation. I can ask for something, but I can't have the conversation when they answer me back. So I'm still on this process at the moment, of trying to learn French every night and having dreams about France when I'm going to bed.
That's the worst, John, when you try because I lived in Lanzarote for 2 years and you learn the line, I want some chicken. And you're like, I want some chicken. And you go and eat, I want some chicken. You go in, you say, can I have some chicken, please? And then they ask you a question. Well, then you're just like, I'll just leave. It's just the worst. I'm very mindful that you found a vegan pizza place, and I know that you'll probably want to get down there and get some food because we have been talking for a while. But thank you so much, John, from not just from me, on behalf of everyone that's ever come across you, read your book, listened to a podcast, had the opportunity to speak to you. You know, I've been so excited to have this opportunity, and you know, you've changed so many lives. You know, mine reading your book, just unbelievable. And I just think you're going to, but keep doing what you're doing. Just be you, spread the positivity, the idea that people can definitely change and just make themselves better.
Obviously, I've read the book and I've heard John talk a lot, and I just think every time, I could just sit and listen to the stories, and sometimes I actually do forget that this is the whole life that you've actually lived and the things that you've gone through. But it's just so inspiring, and obviously from reading the book obviously has an ending, but to hear the things that you're doing after and the opportunities and experiences you're giving people, and especially young kids, it's just so inspirational. And I think for everyone listening is just going to, make such a huge impact and hopefully come away with some things from it. But thank you so much for giving us your time, John. Like, I really appreciate it. I know you're busy with all your training, but we've loved listening to you and talking to you.
Oh, I know. I've loved talking to you both. And I would say, honestly, I'm not just saying it, but you've generally one of the easiest podcasts I've ever done. So
thank you. That's lovely.
Deal with you before you go, right? If you both come out here and you teach me how to swim properly, you come and stay with me rent-free.
Deal.
He wants a personal swim teacher.
That's a deal. We've got you there. We've got you there. Check out Ironbars to Ironman. Sorry, John, just quickly, when the film comes out of your life, because there's got to be Ironbars to Ironman, I'll direct it, no problem. Who would you like to play you? That's the question.
Do you know? Yeah, it's a funny one. I have had a couple of so over the last couple of years in particular, I've had a couple of approaches, and there was a guy I met, an actor, and it was a very surreal experience of meeting an actor that potentially wanted to play you. It's very weird because when you're talking, like, obviously because he's an actor, I could see he was looking at my hands and the way that I present myself. And you can see how very, very weird feeling. But yeah, I don't really know. Really, I don't know.
Hard question.
It is. I'll leave that one with you then, and everyone can just wonder who you think.
Who do you think?
Got to be someone super handsome, superhuman. I don't think anyone can do it, John. I don't think anyone can do it. Sack it, don't matter. But no, thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in, everyone listening. That's probably the best podcast we've ever done and will ever do, Jazz, so maybe we should retire there as well. But no, thank you, John, and we'll see you all next week for the next episode.